My sister didn't even raise her voice when she said, "You're not coming to Hawaii for Christmas." Mom wouldn't look at me. Dad hid behind his phone, and Brad almost smiled like he'd spent years waiting for this exact moment. But I didn't fold. Something inside me pulled tight, cold, steady, deliberate. The kind of feeling that doesn't explode. It plans. They thought they'd cornered me at that table. They had no idea that was the moment everything shifted. If they'd known what I was about to set in motion, they might have walked away first. My name is Emmy, and if you'd met my family years ago, you might have sworn we were the soft kind, the type who baked together on Sundays and left long birthday voicemails. That Brad, my brother-in-law, arrived with big ambition, bigger opinions, and a smile that always felt a few degrees too practiced. Mara adored that shine in him. I learned slowly that every piece of attention she gave him was a piece taken from me. Not all at once. It happened inch by inch. Shorter calls, visits cut early, inside jokes that didn't include me anymore. A new rhythm in the family where I was always a half step behind, like someone had quietly turned the volume down on my existence. At first I explained it away. Mara was building a life. People grow up, stretch out, rearrange their priorities. I didn't want to seem needy or dramatic. So I stayed generous, helped when they needed an extra payment covered, answered late-night calls when Brad needed a quick favor, filled the empty spaces with understanding. That's what you do when you love someone, right? You extend grace, even when you shouldn't. But the gaps grew into something sharper. Family dinners where Mom called Mara the responsible one right in front of me. Dad shrugging off my ideas because Mara already handled it. Holidays where I arrived and realized everyone else had been there an hour earlier. Little things, yes, but little things add up. They tell a story before you're ready to admit you're reading it. Looking back, the signs were there long before Hawaii was even mentioned. A strange tension in the air when I walked into a room. Brad's smirk whenever a conversation shifted away from him. Mara's way of tucking her phone under a napkin when I approached, like my presence was an interruption. Even the group chat rebuilt without me as if I were a file too outdated to transfer. I tried to bring it up once gently. Mara brushed it off with a laugh. "You're overthinking again, Em." Maybe she believed that. Maybe she needed me to. But sitting at that dinner table the night she announced I wasn't invited to Hawaii, I realized something with a clarity that felt almost physical. This wasn't confusion or neglect or drifting apart. It was removal, deliberate, measured, and I wasn't imagining any of it. I used to tell myself families don't just decide to carve someone out. There has to be a misunderstanding, a miscommunication, something you can fix if you just stay patient enough. But the winter before the Hawaii incident proved me wrong in a way I still feel in my spine. It was at my parents' house during one of those holiday gatherings where the air smells like cinnamon and old furniture. I'd stepped away to find an extra blanket walking down the hallway lit only by the dim glow from the living room. That's when I heard Mara, my sister, through a half-closed door. Her voice was thin, almost clipped. "She's a liability," she whispered. I froze. Brad, my brother-in-law, murmured back. "She clings. Honestly, I think she wants us to feel bad taking trips without her. She's jealous." Then Mara's laugh. Short, cruel. "She can barely keep her life together. I'm tired of propping her up." A pause. "She doesn't need to come to Hawaii. She'll ruin it." I can still feel my hand tightening around the blanket I never ended up grabbing. There's a kind of quiet that knocks the air out of you, not because it's loud, but because it's suddenly obvious you've been the punchline in a conversation you weren't supposed to hear. I didn't walk in. I didn't confront them. I just stepped back into the hallway, let the noise of the house swallow me, and carried that silence like something sharp I couldn't put down. After that night, the signs didn't just multiply, they glowed. Group chats formed without me. Invitations got lost. Mara's updates about family plans became vague and summary-like, as if she was briefing a coworker she barely tolerated. When she did call, it always ended with something she needed. A ride, a transfer, a cover story. My name only popped up when it was convenient for her. And Brad, he was worse in the subtle way only smug people manage. The raised eyebrow when I arrived too early. The smirk when I offered to help and he replied, "We've got it." The way he'd correct me on things he didn't even understand just to remind me of where he believed I stood. I learned to read the air around him like weather. If he was smiling, it meant someone was about to get rain. But the turning point wasn't the hallway or the whispering. It came weeks later in the form of an email. My phone buzzed while I was cleaning up my apartment. The sender's name was my mother's, but the message wasn't meant for me. Attached was a rental contract for a beachfront property in Hawaii, and a note addressed to Mara, "Don't tell her. She'll make it dramatic. We don't need her energy ruining things." I stared at it for a long time, not because I didn't understand, but because I finally brutally did. All the little cuts, the exclusions, the quiet evasions, they weren't symptoms of people drifting apart. They were strategy, a coordinated one, and I'd been letting it happen out of love or loyalty or fear of being the one who made it dramatic. But the truth hit me with perfect clarity. I wasn't being dramatic. I was being erased. And once you understand that you don't beg for space, you take it back. I didn't react the night Mara announced Hawaii like it was a prize I'd never earned. I didn't cry, didn't chase after understanding, didn't ask what I'd done wrong. I just sat there letting that tight feeling coil in my chest the way a storm gathers in the distance. Quiet, dense, inevitable. People think anger is loud. Mine wasn't. Mine was a closing door. When I drove home that night, the sky over the city felt strangely sharp, like winter had decided to settle early. I walked into my apartment, hung up my coat, and for the first time in years, I didn't reach for reasons to excuse them. Instead, I reached for truth. Real, documented, inarguable truth. I began by pulling back. Not dramatically, just precisely. When Mara texted asking if I could spot a few hundred because Brad was in between payments, I answered with something simple: I can't. No explanations, no guilt cushioning. When she called needing me to confirm a story for her, I let it ring. When Mom tried to rope me into smoothing things over after one of their arguments, I told her gently, I'm not getting involved anymore. Each step was small, deliberate, and strangely freeing. Then came the lake house. My parents' old place outside the city had always been a family symbol. Summer dinners, mosquito bites, laughter echoing over the water. Years ago, they'd promised it to Mara after her wedding, but they'd never finalized the paperwork. Back then, I hadn't thought much of it. Now, with the email's words still burning a line through my mind, I began to wonder. So I pulled out my own documents, checked old files, cross-referenced what I had with public records, and there it was, stark and neat. Legally, I was still co-owner. They'd never completed the transfer, which meant every renovation, every expense, every decision needed both signatures. And that wasn't the only problem. Payments were overdue. Bills hadn't been cleared. Maintenance fees were untouched. And Brad, always so sure of himself, had been renting the place out under the table to make extra cash, something I confirmed with a single call to the county office. The woman on the line politely explained that any rentals required documented owner permission from both parties. I ended the call with a new kind of calm settling into me. This wasn't revenge. Not yet. This was reclamation. I organized everything methodically: payments, overdue bills, tax notices, ownership confirmations. I wasn't out to hurt them. I wasn't breaking anything. I was simply gathering the pieces of a picture they hoped I'd never see. And as I stacked the papers into a neat folder, I realized something they'd spent years treating me like I was fragile, reactive, dramatic. But my silence wasn't weakness. It was calculation. And the next time we sat at a dinner table together, I wouldn't be the one folding. I arrived at my parents' house early on purpose, not to help, not to smooth things over the way I used to, but to feel the room before everyone else stepped into it. The dining table was already set, silverware lined up perfectly, holiday napkins folded into neat triangles Mara had always insisted on using because it looks more put together. I traced the edge of one with my finger and wondered how many years I'd mistaken performance for closeness. By the time everyone filed in, the air felt heavy with the kind of politeness that only exists when something dangerous sits underneath it. Mara walked in first wearing a dress the color of champagne and a confidence that had always felt a size too big. Brad followed, rolling his shoulders like the house belonged to him now. Mom trailed behind, already flustered, carrying a tray of bread she kept rearranging because she didn't know where to look. Dad slipped into his usual seat at the head of the table and pulled out his phone before he even greeted me. Same script, same cast, but not the same Emmy. We made it through about 15 minutes of small talk that felt like chewing cardboard. Weather, work, something Brad bragged about that no one asked to hear. Mara smiled at everything he said the way you do when you're performing love instead of living it. Then Mom brought up Hawaii, so she began voice light but trembling around the edges. The flights are all set for next week. The place looks beautiful. Right on the water. Mm-hmm. Mara chimed in, not looking at me. We got really lucky. I watched. Her watched Brad lean back like he was settling in for a show. Watched Dad glance at his phone again so he wouldn't have to meet my eyes. And then right on cue, Mara delivered it again, the same line that had cut through me like ice days before. You're not coming to Hawaii for Christmas, Emmy. It's already decided. The room went silent, the kind of silence that has weight. Mom blinked fast. Dad scrolled nowhere. Brad smirked, subtle, but visible, the expression of a man who thinks he knows exactly how someone will crumble. But I didn't. I folded my hands, sat back, let the quiet stretch until even Mara shifted. And then I reached into my bag, pulled out a single folder, and placed it on the table as gently as someone setting down a glass ornament. Mara, I said, my voice calm enough to make her blink, before we talk about Hawaii, we need to talk about the lake house. Her fork stopped halfway to her mouth. What about it? I pushed the folder toward her. Open it. She hesitated. Brad leaned forward, eyebrows tightening. What is this documentation? I said. Payments, bills, county notifications, ownership records. Mom gasped softly. Dad set his phone down for the first time that evening. Mara flipped open the folder, scanning the first page. Her face didn't change right away, but Brad's did. A small twitch at the corner of his jaw, a shift in posture, a calculation starting to crack. You're still on the deed, Mara said, voice suddenly thinner. Yes, I answered. The transfer was never completed. Legally, I still own half, which means every renovation, every decision, and every rental required my signature. Brad's head snapped up. Rentals? Yeah, I said, turning to him. The county office confirmed multiple short-term rentals tied to your name, but since I never approved them, they're invalid. Mom pressed a hand to her chest. Dad's face drained of color. Mara tried to recover. Emmy, if this is about Hawaii, it's not about Hawaii, I cut in. This is about years of decisions made behind my back. Jane is expecting me to stay quiet while you take advantage of property you don't fully own. What's insane is treating me like I'm disposable and then being shocked when I stop playing along. Mom whispered, Emmy? Sweetheart? But I wasn't looking for comfort. I was looking for clarity. So here's what's going to happen. I continued. You and Brad are moving out of the lake house. Effective immediately. Mara's eyes widened, filling with the kind of fear people feel when they finally realize someone they underestimated has teeth. Emmy, you wouldn't do that. I met her gaze head on. I already did. The county has the documents. The review is underway. You'll need to remove your things by the end of the week. Silence slammed into the room. Mom's eyes filled with tears she didn't know where to place. Dad stared at me like he was seeing me as an adult for the first time. Brad sank back in his chair, smirk gone. Bravado evaporated. Mara shook her head slowly. Why now? Why this? Because you made a choice, I said. And for once, I'm making one too. Brad leaned forward, voice low. What do you want? I breathed in, steady, centered. I want boundaries, I said. I want respect. And I want you to understand that erasing someone doesn't make them powerless. It makes them patient. Mara's lip trembled. We were just protecting yourselves, excluding me, calling me dramatic behind closed doors. I leaned in just enough. You created this. Another silence, this one different, heavy with consequences. I gathered my things, stood up, and looked around the table. Mom trembling, Dad speechless, Mara hollow, Brad defeated. You thought I'd fold? I said quietly. But I don't fold. I calculate. And with that, I walked out calm, steady, unshaken. Behind me, no one moved. Not even Brad. They moved out faster than anyone expected. Within 4 days, the lake house porch, once cluttered with Mara's decor and Brad's oversized gear, stood bare, swept clean by urgency rather than respect. The County Review forced their hand, but the truth was simpler. They knew dragging their feet would only expose more of what they'd tried to hide. Mom called twice, her voice soft trembling around edges she couldn't smooth anymore. Dad left a voicemail saying he never realized how bad things had gotten. I didn't return either message right away, not out of spite, just clarity. Sometimes silence isn't punishment, it's oxygen. The Hawaii trip fell apart just as quickly. Flights canceled, plans dissolved. No one celebrated, no one posted photos. The vacation that was supposed to exclude me ended up excluding everyone. I drove to the lake house the following weekend. Winter sunlight spilled across the water, pale and steady. For the first time in years, the place felt mine, not shared, not borrowed, not tolerated. Mine. I stood on the empty porch and let the quiet settle. Not the heavy quiet I'd carried at their dinner table, but a gentler one. A quiet that made room instead of taking it. People think justice comes with noise, but sometimes it sounds like keys in your own hand turning freely in a lock no one thought you'd claim. Justice didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It came in the steady way my life stopped shrinking around people who treated me like an afterthought. Standing there at the lake house, I realized something simple. Family isn't defined by blood, but by who refuses to erase you. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not waiting for apologies that won't come. I'm building something quieter, stronger mine. If you've ever been pushed out by your own family, you're not alone. Tell me where you're watching from, share your story, and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one.